America has become an island nation surrounded by enemies of its own making. We are a fortress nation now. We've become hostile with the neighbors to our south because we've threatened military action on them. And our neighbors to the north have walked away from us because we've threatened to make them the 51st state of America again and again. Now hinting at military action towards them. Canada. Canada has been our closest ally for over 100 years. We fought shoulder to shoulder in World War II. In fact, America's special forces are founded on the collaboration between the 1st Special Forces units from Canada and America working together. When 9/11 happened, 33,000 Americans were stranded in Canada as all flights were grounded. Canadians opened the doors to their homes and gave Americans shelter and fed them, gave them hospitality. If that happened now, would they do the same? No. And why should they? When the Iran hostage crisis happened decades ago, it was the Canadian embassy that hid Americans, risking their own safety, and smuggled them back into the hands of Americans. But the truth is, in Canada, America couldn't ask for a better friend and ally. And now we threaten war on them. And why? For what reason? For the personal gain of one person. And the saddest part about this is, for the first time in American history, Europe looks across the pond in America and doesn't see an ally anymore. It doesn't see a friend. It sees a hostile actor. And with Trump threatening Greenland, he threatens the existence of NATO. And if that happens, he'll have done what Russia and China haven't been able to do since the beginning of the Cold War. And the most shameful part of this is Americans, for the most part, have no idea what's happening. No idea. And this is one of the problems with being such an individualistic culture and not having any kind of knowledge of history or education in history, not knowing the importance of alliances or how they were formed or what our allies did for them, only being told that every country in the world is dependent on us. When it couldn't be further from the truth, America is dependent on every other country. And more than in just a monetary or financial way. America lends its cultures from the histories of the past other nations, not our own. We're a new country. We haven't been around very long, but we left quite a mark on the history of the world so far, the history of civilization. And now we turn towards a dark path. And the question is right now, why aren't Americans actually doing anything? If over 90% of Americans are opposed or unsure about military action happening in Greenland, why aren't people in the streets? If this was France, they'd be in the streets. If this was Denmark, they'd be in the streets. The anti-American protests that are happening all over the world right now dwarf any kind of anti-government protest that's happening in the United States right now. And that's because the American people love to be distracted. One of the things about being an individualistic culture is that you don't care what's happening until it affects you. We have no sense of community. We have no sense of true nationality, of belonging. So in truth, Americans don't care unless it begins to cost them something. And even if it does begin to cost them, say through tariffs, which 55% of that being borne on the shoulders of the American citizens, as long as there's some kind of propaganda that excuses it and a promise of a better tomorrow, at this point, I think we can all agree that Americans are willing to sit by and let this government commit atrocities, and the people would feel comfortable doing nothing to oppose that. We're a nation that's lost any sense of honor. I think that it might exist between soldiers now, but in a general sense, in this nation, it doesn't carry any weight. And I'm seeing something very honorable right now that truly breaks my heart. In the face of an enemy, we're seeing Europe unite, even after Brexit. And I've talked to enough British people that they'd say, I'm British before I'm European. But when put to the test, with an enemy at the doorstep of Europe, we see Europe come together in opposition to us. We are a nation whose histories are so intertwined with Europe, not just from the history before America began, before our populations came to this country and pushed out the natives. But every course, every war, Every move made by our country in the past 250 years has had in some way a relation with Europe. Now that that is almost gone, whatever ties we had with that continent are almost severed for no reason. There's no reason that America should have Greenland. There has been a Chinese warship off the coast of Greenland in decades. Greenland is a threat to nobody. The acquisition of Greenland does nothing but show Canada our hostile intention to solidify our stance on the necessity to attain Canada as the 51st state, to have America be continuous from the continental United States to Greenland to Alaska. Military action against Greenland, to take that, is just as much, if not more, of a provocation than putting missile bases on the Russian border. This would compel military action by our former allies. And again, what is this for? The recent correspondence between Donald Trump and the Prime Minister of Norway has been released. And all it shows is the petulant ramblings of a spoiled person who's never been told no. I will have my way one way or another, saying that because you did not give me the peace prize, I will no longer focus on peace. How is this the actions of an elected official? How is this kind of behavior allowed by the population? Silence is consent. Silence is consent by the American population for more aggressive military action or threats upon the rest of the free world. This is why we are an island nation now. And the world wants to move forward, but it can't because the United States has now gotten in the way of the world moving forward. And this impacts all of us. Because again, the vast majority of Americans stand opposed, but there's no real way for Americans through simple protest to actually oppose the state. All day we can talk about the Second Amendment, but the fact is most Americans don't actually care. As long as they can go to Starbucks, as long as they can go to Ross, as long as they can go to TJ Maxx on the weekend and buy more stuff to fill the hole that national sentiment and a sense of community has left, as long as a common narrative between the people and equal representation, appropriate taxation with representation is lost to most Americans, then there's no sense of common unity between the people. We're a fragmented people, balkanized to our political ideologies. But in the actions of our government, we've seen the galvanizing of European identity in opposition to American identity. And this is a true tragedy for us, because it's the splitting of the Western world. It is a deviation from the path that we once shared. And the impacts of Canada leaving, I don't think Americans really understand how this is going to impact not just our foreign relations, but our economy as a whole. This is going to have a great impact on the automotive industry, which means that jobs are going to be lost. Part of the new trade deal between China and Canada is that almost 50,000 Chinese-made EVs, which are priced in at $26,000 US, are going to be hitting the market in Canada. Only 30,000 Teslas are sold each year in Canada, meaning that Tesla in Canada is essentially just going to be done away with because they can't compete with those kind of prices. And as that supply grows year after year, Americans are going to see the affordability that's coming from Canada in their automotive market, and they're going to want those Chinese vehicles. The breakdown of the automotive monopolies in America is going to be challenged, and it's going to be by popular appeal. But being that Canada is the largest purchaser of American automobiles outside of the United States, and with the opportunity to find much more affordable, reasonable vehicles outside of the traditional US market, it's going to have a dire impact. And again, because the corporations in America only care about the line on the chart continuing to go up, they're going to lay off more people from the workforce. Meaning that in 2026, because this happens, these vehicles hit Canadian shores in the spring. That means that you're going to see a concerted effort within the automobile industry to go fully automated, because that's the only way that they can actually compete with Canada while at the same time losing market space and making sure that profits are still going up. So again, this does impact the American people, the agricultural sector, as well as we shut down relationships with Canada, as we push them away from us and into the arms of our enemy who's acting more reasonable than our country has in mere a decade, a lot of the materials and chemicals that are necessary for America to actually produce and maintain the agriculture that we have here are going to be so much more expensive. And when the inputs of farming are so high right now, and the loss of trade partners means that we have no one to sell to. In 2025, we saw almost record numbers of farm bankruptcies. That's going to explode in 2026. That's because of the loss of one ally. These decisions that are being made for the pride of one person are having a dire impact, or will have a dire impact, on the American people. And for those who wish free travel to Canada, for those who maybe wish to immigrate to Canada, as the relations that we have with Canada continue to devolve over the coming years unless something radical changes, the walls that we are putting up are going to get higher and higher, and any door for the American people to actually escape will begin to close. We're going to enter an age of the American refugee very soon if we continue this course. If we don't pull back from Greenland, if we don't work to maintain these relationships, a normal administration, a sane administration at this point would see that Canada has turned its back on us and would say, we need to do everything that we can to fix this relationship that we have with one of our closest allies. But this administration sees any disagreement on foreign policy as an act of outright hostility. The age of might being right is something that the world decided to leave behind near a century ago. And in that fight to abandon that world, we've had 2 world wars to confirm that decision. At what point does the dismantling of America and our economy, does the solidification of the wealth class as being permanent owners of America in all reality, at what point is it not seen as treason? At what point is it seen as being on purpose? Every action that has happened within the past year has been against the interest of the American people. The only American people that it has been in the interest in is the top 1% of this nation. And when conflict comes, which inevitably it will come, whether that be domestic or internally, or perhaps both, it is the wealthiest people on the planet who've been busy over the past decade building bunkers that they hope to escape to, where they will hoard their wealth and wait for the fights to be fought. And when the fighting is done, they'll slither out of their caves and try to reassert themselves into positions of power. The American people are being used and abused, and we're being torn away from the rest of the world. And if you're mad, you're not mad enough. If you're doing something, you're not doing enough. Our politicians have abandoned us. There is no opposition. The corporate Democrats have no intention of truly fighting back against this administration. And they just hope and pray that there's going to be an election in November. But already there's whispers of changing that to make sure that that doesn't happen. And if America enters a state of war, which might be the only escape for the Republican Party in lieu of the midterms, then that is going to be the avenue that they take. Because this isn't about representation anymore. This isn't about the will of the people. This isn't about what the people want, what the people need. This isn't about what ensures a future for the people. This is about pride. This is about greed. The solipsistic reality that Americans live in, that our politicians thrive in, must come to an end for America to survive, for us to actually regain at some point in the next decades or generations some place of belonging in the community of nations again. But in order for that to happen, the people have to do more. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. And I know that you don't either. And if you're on the outside looking into America, you see people rising up in Minneapolis. You see people having protest. For every one protester, there's 1,000 people getting ready for the Super Bowl. There's 1,000 people who decided to spend their free time not acting in opposition to corruption, not acting in opposition to a military dictatorship, but enjoying the college national football championship. The addiction to the bread and circus that Americans have is going to be their undoing, because it's through this addiction that they've lost any control or will to change the course that America is on. So the question is, do the polls actually matter at this point? Because unless the people are actually willing to hold political actors accountable, then the polls don't actually matter. It's sentiment, and sentiment without any kind of action behind it is just meaningless. Americans need to fight, but they won't. That's the realization that the world is coming to. And Americans don't even realize that the entire world, for the most part, has their back still in opposition to leadership in America right now. The vast majority of Americans are opposed to this administration. The vast majority of the world is opposed to this administration. The vast majority of the population of this planet is against this administration. The alliances between the people and our allies are still there. But between the government and our allies is gone. And it's only through the people that this nation can be saved. It's a real shame watching Canada walk away from us, but I completely understand why they would. The threat to their sovereignty that comes from our president day in and day out, and what first started as a joke, as it usually does to test the waters, has become a call to action. A shameful call to action. But if your hope is to escape this country, I recommend doing everything that you can to do so before the age of the American refugee truly begins. America is relying on global trade. It's relying on global industry and manufacturing for it to actually maintain its existence. All that's going away. So what you have to ask yourself is what America looks like in the vacuum that's left. And is life going to be better? As the world dumps the US dollar and all of our former allies dump their US bonds and the value of the US dollar plummets, the people can be excited about $8,000 an ounce silver, but does it matter when the US dollar is worthless? It doesn't matter when it's not just devalued, but when the US dollar has become obsolete. Because if we continue this course, that is the reality that Americans are sure to see. So one of the things that we're doing in our family is divesting from the US dollar while we can. We are trading it into foreign currencies. We are looking into gold and silver. But getting away from the US dollar is a prudent move right now. We know that the government is printing money again and that the US currency supply is going to be watered down even more. But as more and more debt is being called in and more bonds are being dumped, value of the US dollar is going to continue to go down. So do what you can to maintain whatever funds you actually worked for or earned, and don't just let it evaporate because of the decisions of our president. Make the plans that you can now to escape. Go ahead and get your passport, look into foreign visas. The doors aren't all closed, but they are closing. And if you have the ability to get out, you should. Or you should work towards that in the near future. The plans that we had originally were to be here essentially 6 months per year, 6 months out of the year, for the next 3 years until my wife gets her citizenship. But unfortunately, we might be abandoning those plans just to leave again. The only thing that would actually get us to stay at this point is if the people actually move to act. Because me and my wife both know a lot of refugees. And what we've realized is that those people are now in fear and thinking about leaving because they're seeing the same kind of authoritarianism rise in America that they had ran away from. So it does paint a dark road for America and Americans if you are trapped here, which at some point, as those doors continue to close and as those walls continue to go up, you will be trapped here. Your only options at that point will be comply, fight, or die. Food for thought. Have a good one.